I wasn't expecting my life to turn upside down on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I walked into that small, sunlit cafe, the one tucked between the corner bookstore and the flower shop, looking for nothing more than a cup of coffee and a few moments of quiet. My life lately had been nothing but chaos. Papers, court dates, phone calls that never ended, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing enough for my daughter. I needed a break, even if just for 30 minutes. I spotted an empty table by the window and sat down, letting the hum of conversation and the scent of fresh bread wash over me. My mind was elsewhere, on forms, lawyer emails, and the gnawing fear that I might lose what mattered most. And then I saw her. She smiled. It was effortless, the kind of smile that could light up a room without even trying. Warm, inviting, human. I felt my chest tighten for reasons I couldn't explain. I didn't know her, hadn't seen her before, yet for a fleeting moment, everything felt calmer. The world outside the cafe faded away, and I could focus on that small, perfect gesture. I tried not to stare. I really did. But she noticed me noticing her, and her smile widened slightly, just enough to make my heart skip a beat. I told myself to breathe. I told myself I was imagining things. And yet, something about her lingered, a quiet weight I couldn't place. As I waited for my coffee, I watched her from across the room. She looked ordinary, reading a book, occasionally glancing up at the street through the glass. But there was something precise about her. Something that didn't belong in this casual cafe setting. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or the subtle authority in the way she sipped her tea. I shook my head. No, it was nothing. Just another stranger. But then my phone buzzed. A notification from my lawyer. I glanced at it, thinking it would be routine, but the message made my stomach twist. My custody hearing was today. That same day. The documents, the forms, the anxiety, all of it boiling down to hours that would decide if I'd see my daughter regularly, or if she'd be torn away from me. And then I looked back at her. That same smile, calm, knowing, almost familiar. Something clicked. Not fully, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. I realized, with a creeping sense of dread, that she wasn't just another person enjoying a morning coffee. She was there for a reason. And somehow, she might be the person holding my entire world in her hands. I froze, my heart hammering, trying to make sense of it before it was too late. And in that moment, as she tucked her book away and stood up, I knew that my life was about to collide with hers in a way I could never have imagined. Little did I know that warm, inviting smile would soon become the most terrifying thing I'd ever face. I had never imagined myself in a courtroom, pleading for my daughter like some desperate stranger. But here I was, juggling work, bills, and the remnants of a life that had once felt simple. Her name is Emma, my little girl, 7 years old, with eyes that hold more wonder than any grown-up could muster. Losing her wasn't just a fear. It was a thought that made my chest ache every single day. Emma's mother and I, things had gone downhill faster than I could process. It wasn't dramatic in the movies kind of way, no shouting matches or public arguments, but a quiet unraveling that left us in separate apartments, separate lives, and separate dreams. Our fights had started small. Disagreements over bedtime routines, school schedules, tiny frustrations that accumulated like cracks in a wall. Then came the bigger stuff, decisions about her schooling, her friends, the vacations we would take. Eventually, the cracks became fractures, and we were left staring at each other across a table, neither of us willing to compromise. I wanted to be a good father, really. I took every moment I could with her, every weekend, every evening, every phone call. I built forts in the living room, read her stories until my voice went hoarse, and made pancakes shaped like animals even when I was running late. But apparently, that wasn't enough. She had become a pawn in a legal tug-of-war, and the papers on my kitchen table reminded me every day that the next court date could change everything. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire, had been warning me for weeks. Be ready. The judge is thorough, precise, and she doesn't let emotions sway her. Prepare your case carefully. I nodded, trying to absorb her words while secretly wishing the law would just recognize the love I had for Emma without all this paperwork and evidence. And now, the day of the hearing had arrived. I had spent that morning in the cafe trying to center myself, sipping coffee and hoping the familiar smell of baked bread would calm the storm in my chest. And that's when I saw her. The woman with the smile that seemed to glow even in the soft morning light. I kept replaying the image in my head, trying to rationalize it, to dismiss the creeping feeling of recognition I couldn't quite place. She had walked past me earlier, but there was something in the way she carried herself, methodical, quiet, yet unmistakably commanding, that now gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the thought that she wasn't just a stranger in my life. She was someone who mattered more than I realized. I glanced at the clock. Minutes were slipping away. My hands fidgeted around my coffee cup, and as I finally stood to leave, I noticed her glance in my direction one last time. Brief, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my stomach churn. I had no idea that the next time we met, it wouldn't be in the comforting anonymity of a cafe. It would be in a cold courtroom, with my daughter's future balanced on a decision I wasn't sure I could influence. And in that split second, before I walked out the door, I realized the smile, the one that had felt so innocent, might belong to the person who could change my life forever. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous energy, a stark contrast to the warmth of the cafe from that morning. I stepped inside, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself that I could handle this. I had memorized every document, rehearsed every word, and yet, nothing could prepare me for what awaited. She was there, the same woman, the smile, that same precise, quiet authority. And now it hit me in full force. She wasn't just anyone. She was the judge, the very judge presiding over my custody hearing. My stomach lurched, and for a moment, I couldn't look away. Everything about her screamed control, order, judgment. That warmth I had felt earlier in the cafe was gone, replaced by an unshakable weight that pressed down on me. I tried to focus on Emma, sitting across from me with her small fingers intertwined on her lap, her wide eyes darting between us adults. She looked confused, unsure why grown-ups suddenly seemed so serious. My heart tightened. I wanted to reach across the aisle, grab her hand, whisper that I was here, that everything would be okay. But the rules, the proceedings, and the impossibility of bending reality kept my hands frozen at my sides. My lawyer began, her voice calm but firm, laying out my case, citing evidence, routines, my devotion, and the stability I offered. And all the while, I kept stealing glances at her, at the judge. She listened with that same measured composure, every small nod or pause feeling like it carried more weight than the words themselves. I felt exposed, like someone had taken my entire life and was weighing it on a scale that didn't care about love or memories. And then came the questions, sharp, probing, unrelenting. How do you manage her schooling when you're at work? What steps have you taken to ensure her emotional well-being? Are you prepared to support her mother's role in her life? Each one cut deeper than the last, and every answer I gave seemed to hang in the air, measured, judged, dissected. I wanted to glance up and see her expression, to find some hint of empathy. But the more I looked, the more I realized she was unreadable. That smile from the cafe, the one that had felt like a lifeline, now seemed distant, untouchable, like a secret I was never meant to understand. And then she leaned forward slightly, her eyes meeting mine for the first time in court, and a shiver ran down my spine. There was something in that look, an intensity, a precision, that made me question everything I thought I knew. I wasn't sure if it was hope or fear. The courtroom had grown quieter, the weight of expectation pressing down on everyone. Each page rustle, each shuffled footstep, echoed in my ears like the ticking of a clock counting down to some inevitable moment. I kept stealing glances at her, the judge, the woman from the cafe. Every time our eyes met, I felt my chest tighten, a mix of dread and disbelief twisting together. How could something so ordinary earlier in the day now feel so terrifyingly significant? Emma shifted in her seat, tugging at my sleeve, and I forced a smile. "Almost done, sweetie," I whispered, though my voice trembled. She nodded, but the uncertainty in her eyes mirrored the fear that had taken root inside me. The opposing lawyer spoke next, their tone sharp, relentless, painting a picture of neglect I didn't recognize. Every accusation landed like a hammer blow, and I felt my throat tighten, my hands clench. I knew I had to respond carefully, to remain calm, but inside, panic churned. I could feel my life, my bond with Emma, dangling by a thread. Then came the questions I'd feared most, direct, personal, intimate. Why should your daughter spend her life primarily with you? The judge asked. Her voice was even, neutral, but the intensity in her gaze was impossible to ignore. I swallowed hard. The words caught somewhere between my mind and my lips. I tried to explain about our routines, the dinners we shared, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees I'd kissed better. But the more I spoke, the heavier the room felt, as if some unseen force was weighing every word, measuring my heart against some unknowable standard. And yet, there was a strange rhythm to her presence. A quiet power that didn't shout, didn't demand. It simply existed, unshakable, making me question every instinct I had. That smile from the cafe flickered in my mind, but now it felt layered, complicated. Something behind it, something I couldn't yet decipher, made me uneasy. I noticed her fingers resting lightly on the bench, poised as if she could strike decisively at any moment. My mind raced. Was she leaning toward me? Against me? Or was this all something else entirely? Something personal I hadn't even realized? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The tension became a living thing in the room, wrapping around my shoulders, squeezing my chest. Emma's hand slipped into mine, grounding me, reminding me why I was here. But even that comfort was fragile, fleeting, like a candle flame in a storm. And then, just as I thought I could gather myself, she did something I didn't expect. She paused, looked down at her notes, then slowly raised her head, her eyes locking onto mine with a weight that made my heart stop. In that instant, the world seemed to tilt. I wanted to ask a question, say a word, do anything, but my voice caught in my throat. Because in that single, loaded glance, I realized something terrifying. Whatever decision she was about to make, it would change everything. And I had no idea what she was thinking. Just as I thought I had a handle on the situation, the courtroom doors opened, and a clerk entered with a sealed envelope. The judge, her same calm, unreadable face, took it without breaking eye contact. She opened it slowly, scanning its contents with an intensity that made my stomach drop. Then she looked up at me. "I need to disclose something before we proceed," she said, her voice even but carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. "The mother's attorney and we have a personal history." My mind froze. Personal history? That phrase hit me harder than anything else that day. My grip on reality wobbled. This wasn't just a courtroom decision anymore. This was tangled with something far beyond legal procedure, something that could tilt the scales entirely. The judge paused, letting the words settle like a weight in the room. Emma's hand squeezed mine instinctively, and I realized I had no idea what this revelation meant for her, or for me. The air seemed to thicken, every heartbeat amplified. What I had feared all along wasn't just about custody. It was about trust, bias, and whether anyone in this room could be impartial at all. And in that moment, I knew with terrifying clarity. The outcome was no longer just uncertain. It was unpredictable. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. I stared at her. The judge, the woman who had smiled at me that morning, now a figure of immense authority. Every fiber of my being screamed that this moment would define everything. My bond with Emma, my role as her father, the very life I had built for her. She spoke again, her voice calm, deliberate. "After reviewing all evidence, considering the child's best interests, and acknowledging personal history, I've reached a decision." My heart thumped so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Emma's eyes widened, searching mine for reassurance. I clenched her hand, trying to ground myself, though my stomach twisted with dread. "Custody will be granted primarily to the father," she said, her tone measured, final. Relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. My knees nearly buckled, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Emma leaned into me, her small arms wrapping around mine as I held her close, promising in my heart that nothing would ever come between us again. But then, she added something I hadn't anticipated. "However," she continued, "there will be supervised visitations involving the mother, and I expect full cooperation from both parties. Any attempt to manipulate or obscure facts will result in immediate reconsideration." I nodded quickly, barely processing the words. It sounded reasonable, fair, a second chance for peace. And just as I was about to exhale, she looked at me directly, her gaze sharp and piercing. "One more thing," she said quietly, almost to herself. "You should know. I smiled at you this morning not because of coincidence, but because I recognized you from an earlier case. You've always fought for what's right, for your daughter. That's rare. My blood ran cold. She had been watching me, observing, evaluating, not just today, but long before. That warm, casual smile in the cafe, it wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, a moment that had carried intention and judgment at the same time. I exhaled shakily, holding Emma closer. Relief and unease tangled inside me. I had won, yes, but the line between kindness, judgment, and fate had blurred in a way I would never forget. The judge gave a small nod, gathering her papers. As she rose to leave, I realized nothing in this life was ever truly ordinary, and every smile could hide something far more powerful than I could imagine. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the echo of footsteps and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Emma's small hand in mine felt heavier now, not with fear, but with the quiet understanding of change. She glanced up at me, her eyes bright, trusting, and I realized how fragile and precious that trust truly was. Outside, the sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the city streets. I carried Emma out, holding her close as we navigated the bustling sidewalks. Everything seemed the same, the honking cars, the chatter of strangers, but somehow, it felt different. We had survived a storm, and yet I couldn't shake the memory of her, the judge, her smile, and the unspoken connection that had threaded through the day. In the days that followed, life tried to resume its rhythm, though it was forever altered. Emma laughed again at breakfast, spilling syrup on the table and insisting pancakes could be shaped like dragons if I tried hard enough. I smiled, helping her fold the napkin into a tiny crown. Those small moments reminded me why every battle, every sleepless night, and every courtroom anxiety had mattered. And yet, I couldn't forget her, the judge, the stranger who had smiled at me in the cafe. It was uncanny how a single glance could carry both judgment and empathy, how a smile could weigh more than words. I wondered if she ever realized the storm she had navigated with us, balancing fairness with her own history, guiding the outcome of something so personal, yet so public. One evening, months later, I walked past that same cafe. The bell above the door jingled, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw her inside, her calm presence settling the room like it had once settled me. But when I blinked, she was gone, and the cafe was just a cafe again. A small reminder that life could be ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. I knelt to Emma's level that night, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You know," I whispered, "no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. We face everything together." She smiled, sleepy but confident, and I realized she had absorbed the lesson of that day. Love isn't just about winning battles or court cases. It's about showing up, standing strong, and trusting in those who care. As I tucked her into bed, I looked out the window at the city lights. Life wouldn't be perfect and challenges would come, but we had something unbreakable, a bond forged in ordinary mornings, fierce love, and the kind of courage that only comes when your heart is at stake. And somewhere, in a world I would never fully understand, a small, knowing smile had reminded me that sometimes the people who seem distant or untouchable carry the power to change everything, not with words, but with quiet intention. I closed the door, heart full, ready for whatever came next. Because in the end, love had won. Not the courtroom, not chance, not circumstance. Love.